Hello and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large.
And this is Ruth McLeod, the very sick Southern atheist.
And we are coming to you with our first interview episode.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking to Rachel Bernstein, and she is a counselor and a psychologist out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so Rachel actually got her undergrad at the University of Boston, and then she has 2 master's degrees from the University of Southern California. She has a master's in education and counseling psychology and a master's in marriage and family therapy. So she has her office in Los Angeles where she is a marriage and family counselor, but she also specializes in helping people with their cult background and getting out of their cult.
That's right. And and I'm actually very, very interested in what she has to say about people that she has assisted with getting out of destructive cults.
Yeah.
And how she herself got into that situation. We're going to talk to her about that. So without further ado, here we go. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Chris. I'm so happy to be a part of your show today.
Yes, we're very, very happy to be doing our very first interview for our podcast.
Woohoo! Very nice.
Excellent. So, Rachel, tell us, what is it that you actually do for a living?
I do counseling. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so I work with a whole variety of different clients and have an area of specialization in working with people who have been involved in cults and working with their families, and that's why we're chatting today.
Yeah, exactly. I was very, very interested in that because I've come to find, as someone who has, been coming out of a cult myself, the last 2 years recovering from that I haven't gotten professional counseling, but I've spoken with and met Steve Hassan and now yourself and some others, and found that there are not a lot of counselors out there who are familiar with destructive cults and how they operate and how the mind control works and that sort of thing. So you have some background experience with this.
I do. And just to underscore your point, it is true. There are very few of us who do this. And, I wish there were more. I think it would certainly make it easier for people who want to meet with people face to face. Because I do a lot of phone counseling, a lot of Skype counseling with people all over the world because there are no resources near them. And a lot of people have spent a lot of money and time meeting with other therapists who didn't understand, and they felt like they were paying to teach their therapist about cults or even try to convince them that they exist at all so that then they could hope to get some help.
Yeah, that must be rough, having the burden on the patient.
It's really rough. And you can tell when people have been burned because they'll come to me and say, I do want some help, but I'm afraid that as soon as I open my mouth, you're going to think I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like my previous therapist when I started talking about, the mothership. And
right.
Right?
Well,
like that would do it for other audiences, but not for me.
Right. And admittedly, people coming out of destructive cults have a very unique experience. It's not quite like life in the real world. They're a bubble. They're kind of a bubble world,
It's very true. And it's very isolating.
Well, that leads me to my next question, which is basically, how did you get started in doing counseling of this nature? How did this come across your plate in the first place?
Right. Good question. I had never been in a cult myself, so it does leave people wondering why I do this. When I was growing up, my older sister had a friend, a very good friend, who got involved in Scientology, and we didn't know what that was at the time, and this was already a while back. And, come to find out that while this friend was saying this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and now I'm getting along better with my family than I've ever gotten along with them before, when my parents started trying to find out a little bit more about this because she was trying to get my sister involved, It turns out she hadn't talked to her parents in a very long time. So this was the way she was getting along better. And the parents were not even quite sure where she was. And so this set off alarm bells, certainly for my family, but also you couldn't find any information out about Scientology. The only thing that you could get were things written by L. Ron Hubbard or by people who had had a good experience, but nothing that was negative, which let you know that they were controlling the information that was getting out there. So what was this entity that could convince people that not talking to their parents meant getting along with them? And what was this entity that could keep people from publishing or accessing any criticism about them? So I grew up, in a family of people who were kind of activists by nature, and this became a real issue that we talked about over dinner. And I grew up hearing about these things called cults, and that they can tear families apart and tear relationships apart and cause tremendous damage and heartache within a family system. And then I started learning about groups, their names, their front names. And then when I went off to college, I saw them. I saw these groups that were affiliated with the student union, and they were getting classrooms to use, basically to recruit students who, once they got involved, would have to drop out of school. And no one at the university really knew about it, knew what was going on right under their noses. That was also my first taste of being treated like you are completely paranoid when you say to someone, that's a front group for this group and that group, and they're going to have to drop out of school. And they look at you like, yeah, okay, right. And then that's what would end up happening. Suddenly those people were gone. And they'd say, oh, I think you were right. And then when I was studying to become a therapist, there was this pivotal moment when one of my professors said to the whole class, yes, you want to provide great counseling in-house for your clients, but sometimes you want to connect them with other groups that might be good as adjunct kind of therapy. What sort of groups do you know about out there where you could refer them? And suddenly I was hearing people say, well, EST is a good idea.
Oh my God.
And have they read Dianetics? And just on and on and on. I thought, wait. If people are going to go to therapists and their therapist is going to get them connected with a cult group because the therapist doesn't know, maybe I should be doing this kind of work where I'm out there as a resource that understands the nature and the danger of these groups.
Very much so. EST, of course, being the Earhart Seminar Training is what that stood for. And that was actually something that was, or at least had, roots in Scientology. Because Warner Earhart, the guy who started those seminars, had practiced Scientology, or at least had plagiarized some of his work from that. So very much not a constructive group to be sending clients to.
Right, definitely not. Sorry?
Yeah.
Chris, when you said S, Chris just made that noise, and I kind of looked at him like, what am I missing? Help me.
Yeah, EST was very popular in the, late 70s and 80s?
Yeah, it's still around. It's just changed names a few times. But
Landmark,
it still exists.
Forum.
Yeah.
And these offshoots of things. Scientology over the decades has had, at least 20 different groups come out of it that people went off and started on their own. And that was just from Scientology.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is. It is very interesting. I remember also when I was in college going to get some, university professor to kind of understand what was happening, and they all ignored me. And then I went to the dean of Marsh Chapel. This is at Boston University. And I went to him and I said, you know what, everyone has sort of treated me like, I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm being paranoid, but there are cults on your campus. And he turned to me and he said, oh, I know. And I almost broke down into tears. I mean, it was hard just being dismissed because all I was trying to do was help and educate and protect. And he said, oh, absolutely. I mean, there are people who get involved in these front groups, and it turns out that it's a cultic group, And I said, you know what, I want to go. I want to check out one of these groups, because I used to like to go to the introductory meetings and other things. So it wasn't just hearsay. I could say that I saw this happen for myself. And I went to one of these groups that was meeting in a classroom, and it was affiliated with the student union on campus. And I heard somebody say, I can't come to the Bible study next week because I have finals. And the person leading the Bible study said, well, then you're making a choice between getting good grades and having a relationship with God.
Oh.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is on a university campus.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does not surprise me in the slightest. That is exactly how cults, they inculcate that, us versus them, we are the most special group, and nothing else matters as much as what we're doing here.
Exactly. Exactly right. And if you care about those things, you're caring about things that really don't matter and that shouldn't matter in the whole scheme of things, because everything pales in comparison, according to these people, having a relationship with God, and you're being selfish. And then they can also say, we're not making people come back. There's no lock on the door. We're not holding people against their will, right? But it's all
right. We don't have a gun on them.
Right, exactly. But it's all in those subtle fear-based messages that get people to feel stuck.
Exactly. So that's really interesting. So you, as a psychology student or major, you must have been fascinating for you to go and observe how these things worked.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. And throughout the years, I've done it when I've taught classes, sometimes even for high school students and college students. Part of the final exam is to come with me to an introductory meeting of, fill in the blank cult. I make sure they'll live with me too, but they've done a lot of educating themselves about what to watch out for and the techniques of control. And they bring a checklist with them. And as soon as they see that technique being used, they check it off. And by the end of the night, they all have the check marks that are filling out every technique and giving examples of it. And then, being able to then talk about what they saw and how it was used and how they could see people really succumbing to it was a very interesting exercise, I found. What was also equally fascinating was noticing how we were received if any of us questioned what was happening, if we were sort of taking the risk of crashing their spiritual party,
Sort of challenging anything they were asserting and that sort of thing.
Yeah, or pointing out any kind of inconsistencies. People turned on you right away. And that was part of what I wanted people to see, that there's a whole social psychological piece that exists within cults, that it's not just about the leader and the follower, or the leader and the followers. There are the other people involved too that will turn on you, that will try to work on you, because they don't want cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. They don't want you, right, to make them feel like they're devoting themselves to something that might not be what they think it is or what they were promised it was.
And that's a very important concept. Could you explain, just for anybody who's listening who's not as familiar with this as you and I, as we are, what is cognitive dissonance and how that basically works?
Sure. It's a good term to have, to kind of keep in your back pocket when it comes to cults, when it comes to anyone who's trying to sell you something, when it comes to relationships that turn out to be emotionally controlling, abusive, where somehow things don't follow a logical course. And our minds try to make sense of things that don't make sense. And if suddenly something is going awry, like A plus B suddenly doesn't equal C, it equals M, and the leader is saying it with ultimate conviction, and the people around are nodding their heads in agreement, you think there's something wrong with you, that you're not somehow getting it. And then you are, even in a subconscious way, pushing your mind to make sense of it. Well, it must be that I just don't understand it yet. Or it must be that I haven't opened my heart up to it yet. Or it must be that, everyone's already working on this sort of higher plane and I'm not there yet. I have to try harder. I have to work harder. Because it is so uncomfortable to be in an environment where things don't make sense. And within a cultic system, the teachings don't make sense. They don't necessarily have to. It doesn't matter. But for people outside, like, for example, family and friends of people involved in cults, they can see how things are not coming together. They can see how the people in their family are learning all about how wonderful it is to have connections to other people, and they're getting guidance about how to be better in this world at the same time that they're being incredibly insensitive to their family members. They're not showing up for important moments. They don't mind missing important moments, it seems. And so how can that be? That here they're behaving very differently than the words that are coming out of their mouth, and people try to point that out to them, and it doesn't go well.
Right.
Because they can't really make sense of it themselves. They just start to, I guess, as a way to kind of cure the cognitive dissonance, they will start to say things that I've heard time and time again. Well, there's no way for you to understand this because you're not in it. Or you've only been in it for a year, so you're not going to understand it to the level that we understand it. Or you haven't opened your heart up enough, your mind up enough, whatever. And so somehow, if you don't understand it, that's on you.
Right.
Because it's a perfect system and the leader is perfect, so it has to, on some cosmic level, make sense. So if you're not understanding it, that's your limitation.
Exactly. In Scientology, one other thing that they will use, because everything you're saying was absolutely used, and another one that people will come up with if you start questioning particular parts of the dogma or things about it that aren't making a lot of sense is, oh, well, you just need to do your next level. Because Scientology is a progression of steps, right? And so you just need to do, you'll understand that after your next step or your next one or your next one. And there have been people who have come out after 2 decades saying they kept going on because they kept thinking that when they got to the highest level, it was all going to make sense. And then, of course, they get to the highest level and it still doesn't make any damn sense.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. Right. All at the same time that's happening, that the carrot is in front of you all the time, where you have to do this next level or bring new people in or pay more money or whatever the group is telling you need to do in order to achieve something of greater level or greater spirituality or greater understanding or greater healing. You are also being given the message, it's wrong if you question it, and it's wrong if you doubt it. So
very much so.
You're becoming more and more handicapped from having that cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is an important thing. It's like having critical thinking, having a logical mind. You can see that things are not fitting together. This puzzle piece is never going to fit in that space. I mean, you can smush it in and cram it in, but it's not the right piece. But somehow, if you're noticing that, you're supposed to think of yourself as being less than, not actually able to see what you need to be seeing in order to keep yourself safe. So everything's turned, and you're supposed to see it in the opposite way.
Precisely. It's also very important to understand how cognitive dissonance is not something that just happens in a cult environment. Right. It happens every single day to almost every single person who's alive. When they encounter something that they don't understand or doesn't make sense to them, this phenomenon occurs.
Like people like Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How is it possible that, Donald Trump is a serious contender for the president right now? I got all kinds of cognitive dissonance about that. So
I just have a question about the main difference that someone would put on the classification of a group as a cult as compared to a traditional religion. A lot of your experiences actually remind me of what I did in college myself. If I was invited to a religious organization's meetup, or not meetup, group on campus, I would always go at least once, because as an atheist, I feel like if I'm going to deny everything, I might as well try everything, which may or may not be a good call on my part. But a lot of the experiences that Chris tell me about coming out of the cult of Scientology, and a lot of experiences that I hear from people with their cults, I don't necessarily classify myself as coming from a cult, but to some degree, I have gone through a lot of the same things, leaving. I was raised Church of Christ. And so when I left, I had the same people telling me, well, you don't understand it because you don't have enough faith, or, you're not there yet because of this or because of that. So I had a lot of those same experiences, but I don't see myself as coming from a cult. Some atheists would disagree with me because we have a tendency to call all religion cults. But isn't there some kind of fine line between the two that can be picked up?
Yeah, I do think there is, yes. And of course, as you get into more stringent forms of anything and more fundamentalist forms of anything, you're going to have more cult-like tendencies. But that still doesn't necessarily mean that it's a cult. I think that it's important to have a division where you can have then some clarity about what is a cult and what isn't. And the way I define it isn't just that a cult is something different or wacky to a certain degree, or a fringe group, but really it is about the nature of the relationship between the leader and the followers.
Right.
And that is at the helm of what I consider to be a cult, or a destructive cult is really how I use the term.
Yes.
And so you can have that same idea that you really are just supposed to believe, let go, let God, just, open your mind up and your heart up, et cetera, et cetera. But I get asked a lot, what's the difference between very fundamentalist branches of religions and cults? Sometimes not very much, but but
right.
Still you have these characteristics that I think about a lot. Now, of course, you're going to have the unquestioning devotion, unquestioning loyalty. That's true of fundamentalist branches, and that's also true of cults. Where I think it starts to be divergent is that you have the deception in a cult. With a fundamentalist branch of anything, or even just very stringent group or political group or whatever else, you're told ahead of time what the expectation is if you're going to be getting involved as an adult, or if you're thinking about remaining there. You're told, for example, I'm thinking from my own perspective of being Jewish, if I were to want to become a highly stringent Orthodox Jew, what I would expect is that I would need to take classes to find out about it. I would also be told ahead of time what the expectations are, how I'm supposed to dress, what I'm supposed to eat, not eat, et cetera, so that you can make a fully informed decision about being involved or not. That never happens in a cult.
Okay.
You are never given the information ahead of time about what the true reason is for you to be in it. Because ultimately, for most cults, the true reason is because getting more people in, and getting more devoted people in, and getting people in who are willing to make sacrifices of all kinds for you, feed the leader's ego. And it keeps a well-oiled machine well-oiled. It is not about you achieving your goals. It is about you furthering the goals of the group.
Wow.
Same thing with a one-on-one kind of cult, a relationship that's emotionally controlling and manipulative. You're feeding the ego of the person controlling you. You don't get anything out of it. And so, yes, in some groups, you can learn some, I've heard it with some groups that I know to be cults. people say, well, I did get something from it. I got over my fear of public speaking, and they helped me get off this drug or that drug. And all of that is fine, and I don't want people to have to give up the things that they got. But the issue for me is, what did you have to give up in order to get that?
Right.
And what did you have to give up? What kind of rights did you have to give up that in society at large are constitutionally protected but not protected in a group? How many years did you give up? How much money did you have to give up? How many relationships did you have to give up? And most importantly, how much of your ability to trust yourself and rely on yourself and feel confident did you have to give up in order to get these little bits of gains?
That's right. That's a very, very important point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's often, in my experience in the last couple of years, that question has come up again and again of, well, didn't you get anything out of it? And was there some good in it? And I even ended up doing a whole article about that, because of course there had to be some good in it, or people wouldn't commit to something like Scientology for years or decades. But that trade-off point that you make is precisely the thing that they have to look at, and that people who are unfortunately trapped in that bubble world don't have the rational thinking power to make those comparisons. They just emphasize whatever good things they have gotten out of it, and then they devalue or ignore the trade-offs and the things that they've had to sacrifice or give up. And that's part of the cult thinking process. That's part of one of the ways that they manipulate you into thinking along those lines. If you become, where you're questioning what's going on or something, they reinforce, yes, but you got this and you got this, and didn't it handle this for you? And try to, get those gains. Well, in Scientology, the word we would use was that they would rehab them. They would rehabilitate the win. They would bring it back, and remind you of it and tell you. And this was a very powerful technique. I actually got people back into Scientology who had left by reminding them, by rehabilitating those wins and gains they had, by simply talking about it. It wasn't even like some arcane spell casting in order to get them to do it. I would just say, well, why did you get into Scientology? Well, I wanted to, blah, blah, blah. And you go, good. Well, what did that happen? And they go, well, I got this and this. And you go, good. Well, you got that much. And so there's something to this. That there's a lot more to get. And they go, yeah. And and you get them all back into the thinking processes of the cult.
Right, exactly.
I think I had a boyfriend like that.
Well, I'm out. The other thing that I'm really glad you also just said, Rachel, was the one-on-one cult, because it's not just religious cults.
No.
There are political cults, there's social group cults, and there's also simply codependent relationships where one partner basically acts like a cult member or cult leader.
Boyfriend cult. Oh, yeah. Got it.
Do you encounter that sort of thing? Have you done counseling on that sort of thing?
I do. I have 4 clients right now who are dealing with one-on-ones. Either they are in them or family members are concerned about their children or siblings who are in them. It is almost identical. The only thing missing is the social, psychological piece, the group dynamics. But the kind of control is the exact same. Because what drives the person controlling you is it's the same thing that drives a cult leader very often. So you're going to have the same kinds of issues coming up and the same kinds of methods of control. Mixed in with some other piece that I've noticed happens, I'd say about 9 times out of 10 in these kinds of one-on-one cults, where you are made to feel that the person controlling you is someone who is protecting you, who is protecting you from everyone else in your life who has only done you harm. And they work very hard to rewrite your history, which is what cults do, to say that, it was all bad and that you were lucky enough to come across, me, so I could, be now this benevolent, wonderful protector in your life. It's really quite the opposite. But the other thing that can be quite insidious is that people who are trying to control other people in one-on-ones will often use some guilt induction along with making you feel like you should feel happy and proud that you were specially chosen by this person, meaning you come to believe that the person who's controlling you has had a very hard life, him or herself, and has been abandoned before and is easily hurt. And if you're a nice person, and if you feel like you're being helped and protected by this person, you should then feel indebted to them, and you should also never hurt them and never abandon them like everyone else has. And usually it's just a whole story that's made up from start to finish. Or it could be that they were so controlling, so manipulative, so awful that people did abandon them. But it wasn't because they weren't deserving of those things. It's because they pushed people away. So sometimes people will get stuck in these relationships out of the goodness of their own heart, that they don't want to hurt this person who really, in essence, is hurting them.
That's fascinating.
I need to take that whole speech and give it to my college self. just to remind my college self of it. It's okay to focus on me and like walk away from something. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, that guilt thing is important, and it certainly has manifestations in a group or social environment too. Yeah. With cults, as though they will definitely run that sort of thing on you too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the cult leaders that have been arrested for a variety of different things, usually not for the things they should be arrested for, but there aren't enough laws out there to protect people from those sorts of things. But if they feel they're above people, they often feel that they're above the law, which you kind of hope for, because then they can be arrested for tax evasion and other sorts of things. But then what happens is sometimes people will leave saying, wow, turns out my cult leader is a felon. That does change things a bit. But other people will run to the cult leader's side, that here they are the underdog. They are being unfairly judged, cruelly treated. They are suffering like Jesus did.
Completely. They become martyrs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And every cause just loves a martyr. I have a list I've been using of cult characteristics, and I'll put a link up on the podcast to this. I'm probably going to butcher these people's names, but it's Janja Lalich and Michael Langone.
Yeah, Janja Lalich. And
Janja, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And they have this paper, characteristics associated with cultic groups. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'll put the checklist up. I've been using this since I got out of Scientology, and it's been very helpful reference for me as to the exact things that a person could look at to figure out, is this group a destructive cult, or does it simply have maybe a couple bad apples in it, but overall the group actually is not really that, it is not a destructive cult per se. Mm-hmm. And it's been a good guideline for me. And I was going to ask if you'd seen it or were familiar with it. So I guess you have. Yeah.
And Janya's wonderful. Michael Langone's wonderful. They have really devoted themselves to helping many, many people and have helped many, many people. And even though I think in my time doing this, 25 years or so, I've worked with, over 1,000 former cult members at this point. And Janya, I know, has, I'm sure, worked with even more. There are a lot of characteristics that make something a cult, and it's a very important thing to learn about, because then you can see how it can come in different forms, and it's not about the yellow robes, and it's not about that they might live on a compound or not. It's really about the techniques that are being used to make you feel that this is your only choice, this is the only way for you to be happy, to be healthy, to be protected, to have the answers, whatever the cult is. If it's a psychological cult, it's the only way to get over your fears. And if it's a Bible-based cult, it's the only true way to believe and the only way to have a connection with God, et cetera, et cetera. I find that actually people can find out the most about the level of danger and control and manipulation in a group, and even in a one-on-one cult or abusive or emotionally controlling relationship, when they question it and when they say they're not coming back. That's, there are people who I know who will argue with me. No, the group that I was in wasn't a cult at all. Or the group I'm in now is not a cult. Well, come to find out, they do everything people ask them to do. They raise a lot of money for the group. They're lauded. They're given awards. And so they're having a perfectly wonderful experience. And I've said to them, if you feel like taking a risk, next time you go to a meeting, to a seminar, to a weekend workshop, to a Bible study, try disagreeing with the person leading it just for a second and then see what happens.
Yep.
Or when they tell you at the end, well, you have to sign up again, and you say, nah, I'm thinking I'm going to take a little break. See what happens. I think then you get the true nature of the group, because within a cult, you're never done. You never graduate. You
That's
never
right.
get to the end of anything. And within Scientology, as you know, they have people doing the same things over and over and over again, the same levels over and over again.
That's right.
And you didn't do it right, or we didn't teach it right, or now there's a new version. It's like whatever class 3.0. So
Exactly. It's a hamster wheel effect.
It's a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I wanted to ask you about you had a run-in with Scientology fairly early on in your career.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes, I did.
Pray tell.
Oh, I'm pulled up for your story.
Wow, that was not fun. I was a youngster, not that I was old, but the ink was still drying basically on my counseling license. And I was doing counseling, seeing a couple of my first clients, and I happened to be working at a place that was very close to the Celebrity Center. And
in Los Angeles.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's in Hollywood, California.
Right.
Yep.
So suddenly a woman came to see me, a young woman, about 19, 20. She was very nervous, very skittish, wouldn't leave her information, wouldn't fill out any forms, told me to call her by a nickname. And I thought that she was in danger. I thought she was being followed. I thought that maybe someone was after her who might hurt her. And she said that she is in Scientology and she's really starting to wonder about it. And she was raised in it, so it wasn't something of her choosing, which is a whole other subject about people who were, second generation, third generation cult members that we can talk about, for a long time with the people I've talked to who say it was as though they were raised on another planet.
I have some familiarity with that.
Okay, right. So she was very nervous about talking to me, was checking the room to see if I had any hidden cameras, because she kept looking around, and I said, I'm sorry, is there something bothering you? Is the air conditioning blowing on you? I didn't know why she kept looking up at the vents and things, and she said, I'm looking to see if there's a red light, if there's a camera on me. And then she left and said, if anyone calls to find out if I was here, please say no. But turns out, when she got back, her auditor in Scientology asked her what she had done that day and who she had talked to, and she felt like she had to share everything. And she also thought she could trust this person who had said, even though, you might not be able to trust a lot of people here, you can trust me. Well, come to find out, that auditor was also covering her own tush and shared the information that she had come to see me and used my name, so then my name was in a file there. I then, about a week later, had someone contact me who said that he wanted to get out of Scientology and could I help him. I said, I didn't know. Why don't you come and we'll talk and see what the situation is? And he asked me very leading questions, like, would you try to advise my family to kidnap me, using those kinds of words. And I thought, what is this about?
Interesting.
And then, even though I didn't say anything, quote unquote, wrong, according to them, I got a full transcript of that session with a handwritten note on top, not signed, just handwritten, saying, just to let you know, we are watching and listening.
What?
And you could see, I turned like sheet white.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if this was the mafia. I didn't know, because it sort of felt like it.
Yeah.
And then...
Creepy people doing creepy things.
Then they tried to get my home address. I had just moved. They called to say they called the clinic where I was working, saying they were from a delivery company and they wanted to deliver something to my house. And the person knew enough not to give out my personal information, but they were trying to track me down. And then somehow they did find me, and there were these cars with, darkened windows outside of my house. And then I got a letter from the board that oversees my license saying that a formal complaint had been lodged against me.
What?
And I was being accused of, and it was a whole litany of things that, some of the terms I had to look up. I didn't know what they were.
Oh my gosh!
I don't think I did that because I don't know what that is. And it was so frightening. And then I was being followed by these two thugs who were Scientology private eyes, who were standing outside my office building where I was working and would block my way to get out of the building. And it was really very frightening. So, and then they dressed up like, I don't know if it was these private eyes or other people, but they dressed up like people in the janitorial staff in the building where I was working and went through my files. And this was all not because I had said anything or done anything, but just because I was someone who could be out there potentially as a resource to help people who were thinking about either leaving or starting to just question if they wanted to stay in Scientology. That was it. That was all I was doing.
Not even helping them. Just somebody had a question, came to you, and now this is happening. Wow.
Yeah. So the woman at the board, finally, when my name was cleared and I had to hire an attorney and et cetera, she said, well, I couldn't say what I wanted to say to you then at the time because we had to follow protocol. But now that your name has been cleared, let me tell you, this is what happens to almost everyone who deals with groups like Scientology.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just going to be what you're going to deal with every once in a while until they realize that they can't get away with it or the law changes or something. And I thought, I don't know if I want to be doing this. I mean, I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I hope one day to, I was in my early 20s at the time, but I hope one day to have children. I don't want to put them at risk, etc.
Right. Wow.
But there's something that kicked in where I remembered something my father said when he started going around, and once he learned about cults, he was going around to college campuses and summer camps and teaching people about cults. He really took it on as an activist. And he was being harassed at the time by the Moonies. They were the ones who did the harassing. And we would get calls at our house, sometimes in the middle of the night.
What?
I remember him saying, if you're not in physical danger, because of course you don't want to put yourself in harm's way if you can at all help it.
Right.
But you don't want to let the bullies win.
Right.
And that was it. It was like they were hoping to kind of stop me, but instead it lit a fire under me. And I thought, I don't want to let the bullies win. And I don't want to let them feel like they can bully me from helping people or they can bully people from getting help. And as long as I know I'm not in physical danger, of course, you never know that for sure, but you hope. And there wasn't any sign of that for me. I just continued. And then I was left alone for a long period of time, then had kids. and stayed pretty quiet about what I did. I didn't have a website that announced, hey, I do this kind of counseling. I didn't alert people. And it was sometimes hard for people to find me. But now that my kids are a little bit older, I asked if they'd be ready for me to be back on the scene in a more vocal way. And they said, yeah, we can handle it. But it really is amazing what you have to deal with.
They did not know they were going to be messing with a badass. I love this.
It's very true, and Scientology, as you mentioned, there is not the only destructive cult out there that does this sort of bizarre harassment.
The Moonies, really?
Oh yeah,
yeah. I remember the phone would ring in the middle of the night, and I'd hear my father saying, "That's enough," like stop doing that. That's enough. And I'd run in, I'd say, what are you going to do? And he'd say, I'm going back to bed. I don't know what you're going to do, but that's what I'm doing, Yeah, it was really fascinating. Yeah, and there are groups now that are litigious, and they threaten, and they do a lot of things that they really shouldn't do. And it makes it hard for people sometimes to want to do this work. But a lot of it is, you don't ever know for sure, but really by and large, their bark is worse than their bite.
Very much so. A lot of saber rattling going on.
Yeah, a lot of threatening and a lot of making you just feel scared, which is what they're hoping.
Exactly. I've likened it to a schoolyard bully. They talk tough. They might grab you and shake you a little bit, but when the teacher comes around, they're all, grins and everything's great and we're the best of friends. And I think the internet has done a lot to ensure people's or make it easier for people to be safe, because in that analogy of the school ground, the internet becomes that teacher where you can make the entire world find out in a day what somebody has done.
Yes, absolutely right. And something else that always struck me was how liberally a lot of these groups just lied and somehow got away with it for a long period of time. I mean, clients would bring in their disconnection notices to say, look what happened to me, and it would be signed by, this was an actual copy. It's not a copy. It was the actual document. You could see that it was signed by a Scientologist, actually two. Usually it has two signatures on it. And all the time, that you would hear in the news that they'd say, that doesn't exist. We never send out these notices. We don't have a disconnection policy. And I'm thinking, wait, I'm holding one in my hand. What are you talking about?
That's right.
Yeah, right.
No, the internet has been the great equalizer in that regard, and I think that's true for all destructive cults. It's so much harder to get away with being able to be such a pathological, blatant liar.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to find out. It's just literally at your fingertips now. Whereas before the internet was around, you had to go to the library, you had to go down to the court records, you had to really dig. You had to be very motivated in order to find out the truth about some of these things.
Very true. Very true. It reminds me of when a while ago, I'm trying to think, I think in 2008, I was flown to Austin, Texas to help with the raid on the FLDS compound, where the fundamentalist branch of the Latter-day Saints, not affiliated with regular Mormons, they took a lot of the women and children off the compound. And I disagreed with a lot of how it was handled, but still, what I was very pleased about was that things that had happened for years in the shadows were being brought to light.
Mm-hmm.
And there were camera crews and people documenting what was happening. And what you hope is that stops people from feeling that they can get away with things, and that the people who do things behind closed doors and the people who do things very, with a lot of secrecy and hoping that no one notices. If you don't have a conscience, really, and if you have the ego need to control people, you're going to have so much more success at what you do if there are no eyes on you. And the only thing that stops certain people who have what I call an external locus of control, they're not driven internally by doing the right thing. They're only going to stop if they're busted, basically.
Right. That holy phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. Then knowing that a camera crew is right there, knowing that there are now court documents, knowing that things just can't keep happening in the shadows, I think stops people from doing a lot of things they shouldn't do, which is really good.
Well, on a slightly different note, I'm wondering now, what kind of advice, as you've dealt with now, 1,000 people in this regard over all these years. It's tremendously valuable experience that you have. I have been asked many times over the last 2 years that I've been doing my videos and blogs, and articles and whatnot. I'm contacted by family and friends of people who are in cults. Especially Scientology, of course, right? But I've also spoken with people who are ex-JWs and that sort of thing, right? What advice do you have, or do you give to family or friends if they contact you as to what they should do to deal with their family or their friends who are in a destructive cult? There's no question that they're in it. So how do they talk to them? What should they not do? What kind of advice do you give?
Okay, it's a good question, and sometimes it's case specific.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah, like if they're in something like Tony Alamo's group, where he's running it from jail. He's in prison, and
You're kidding.
He's in prison for really awful things, and he still has this compound that he's running. And
of course he does. Of course he does.
Of course he does.
Yeah, of course.
Duh.
Why should I be surprised by that?
Right. So with a group like that, it's going to be a little different than, dealing with a lot of horrible sexual stuff and, things people really have a lot to have to heal from a young age in that group. To groups that are kind of the large group awareness trainings, and where they've become sort of obnoxious because every family gathering they're recruiting for this group and only speaking in the lingo, and it's different for each situation. But typically what I advise families to do, first of all, is to be unified, because sometimes as a family counselor, I think of this a lot. When we're asking people to really question what they just got involved in, and we're asking them to consider leaving and going back into their family system, let's look at the family system for a moment. And this is not to blame the family at all, but to say you want to be able to be unified so that the person coming back is happy to be back, where you're also not undercutting someone else's efforts. I find this sometimes with family members who are taught to not be aggressive and to not be confrontative, and given an opportunity to meet with the person who they're really trying to help get out of a cult, someone else in the family who just doesn't have that same kind of patience will say, "What the hell have you been thinking? Do you realize what this did to your parents?" You've got to help them all know that they need to be aligned and be handling this in a unified way. And no one's going to be undercutting or sabotaging the effort. So that's what I like to meet with the whole family first and talk to them to help teach them about the way to do this, and that if someone just can't hold it in, then they can't be involved in the effort. Someone who's just going to kind of go renegade, and just do their own thing. That's one. The other thing that I think is very important is to not fall into the trap that's been set by the cult. Cults will very often say, again, that you were lucky. Again, if you were raised in it, it's a different story, and that's another conversation. But They will say, you were lucky to find us, that we could protect you from all of these awful people who you were raised with, who are so negative, who are so critical of you, who are people who, if they're against you being involved in this group, it clearly shows that they don't truly love you and they don't truly care about you. So knowing that that's what's in a lot of people's heads going into any kind of an intervention or any kind of effort by the family has to be very cautious about then not coming out in criticism of the group and not being quote unquote negative. Because then the person in the group can easily say, they were right about my family. And this clearly is a sign that they don't love me and care about me. So it's not for the family, I think, to come out first with trying to educate their loved one about the fact that this is a cult, but rather just to reestablish communication that feels good, that feels safe.
Right. You want the family unit or the relationship, friends or whatever, to be the safe spot for the person, because the cult has become their safe spot. Right.
And they've become their new family or whatever else. So for the family to reestablish itself as loving, caring, being there, there's plenty of time to educate the person about the fact that their cult is a cult. So first, to have the family behind the scenes do all the research they need to find out really about the group, to hire a private eye if there isn't enough information out there on the internet to really do their research, so they have all the information, but not present it quite yet to their loved one. Instead, to find a way to talk to them so that that loved one then can open up and feel comfortable and feel safe actually sharing that I thought this was the best thing since sliced bread. Turns out it's not. They're not going to say that at first, especially if they feel like they can't quite trust their family. So it's important, I think, also for the person who they're trying to help to not be made to feel like they have been snowed and like they're stupid in any way. So I advise families to not come out like, oh, honey, you just don't know. But instead, to be what I call wondering out loud, like saying, so, John, we don't really know a lot about this group, but we'd love to know more. We're wondering if you can tell us what you like about it and what you're getting from it. And just start the conversation there. So the person, your loved one, can be the expert in the room. You're not the expert knowing more than he or she does. They can teach you. And that's a very safe way of starting a conversation where they feel like they're meeting you head to head. And it's okay. It's safe. You also then don't question and say, well, that's probably not true. They're probably those are all lies, right? You just let them keep talking, wondering more about what they're getting from it. You also get a lot of insight when someone says, well, yeah, I'm actually getting a lot from this group because it's helping me see that I don't have to be worried about so much. Oh, I see. So you were worried about a lot of things before and you're not as worried now. What sort of things were you worried about? It's right. It's just a nice conversation.
No, that's excellent, because you're getting right to the thing that the cult is solving for the person or providing to the person, that again, their safe spot, the thing that they joined the cult for in the first place.
Exactly. And then to say, if you're noticing that you're not making a lot of headway and they're not really feeling comfortable talking to you, you then do something that I call talking about talking, which can feel very passive, but it's not. It's actually very pivotal, where you say, you know what? It seems like when we're talking about what you're doing now and the group that you're in, it gets tense, or you come out at us like somehow we're attacking you, even though we're not, but it feels that way, and you're getting kind of confrontative. So let's talk about a way we can talk about this. Would you like it so that we don't ask you questions, and you'd rather just tell us, or you'd like to show us some materials? How can we talk about this? The message is, we're not going to take no for an answer, basically. We're going to find a way to connect. And even if you have to set the parameters, that's fine. We'll go along with it. But it's not if we can talk, it's how. which means it's going to happen. We just have to find a way that feels comfortable and safe for you now. And it also shows families to be flexible, which is a lovely thing for especially a child to see, that their parents are willing to shift to accommodate what they need right then. But I think also it's important to remind people of their past. If there are good moments from their past and you have a chance to talk to them and you have a chance or to meet with them, you remind them of something funny or fun. You remind them of a trip that you all went on that was really great. You show them family pictures. Have them have a visual reminder of their true past, knowing that a cult will rewrite people's histories so that it's much easier to disconnect from family. It's much easier to feel like life was bad until you got involved in this group. What I advise families to do is, if they're only going to be able to talk to their loved one on the phone, then they prepare some stories to tell them where they were remembering something fun that they had all done together, or they were remembering a time that they know their child, for example, is going to have a really wonderful recollection about. And if they're able to meet with them in person or do video chat, to have some pictures ready to show them about a time that was a lovely time where they are with their family, and it shows that life was actually potentially better than the cult wants them to think it was, or the person they're with in a one-on-one wants them to believe it was. And I think that's a very powerful thing, knowing that controlling people who want you to be completely devoted to them and don't want you to be connected to anyone else in the same way, and don't want you to have allegiance or be missing anyone, they will rewrite your history, and they will make it seem like things that happened to you were really bad things, or that your parents were abusive in some way, or that your friends really weren't your friends and we are your friends. So the more proof you can provide people about their history, the more they realize that the group might not have been accurate about that. And then you hope that there is then this cascade that takes place that's connected to the idea of cognitive dissonance. A plus B, I just realized, does not equal C. My past wasn't all bad. So maybe they were wrong about that. What else could they be wrong about?
Exactly. Start getting some doubts and reservations going there about some of the lies they've been telling themselves all these years.
Yeah. And I think also developing a team. Sometimes parents are not equipped to do this on their own, or siblings are just not willing to be involved, or whatever. There are a lot of reasons people do and don't do what they do. So sometimes getting other people involved, friends, other relatives, cousins, even previous clergy people, coaches, people who were prominent in their loved ones' lives, who they feel good about, who they feel safe with, to see if they can give them a call, if they can set up a time to get together, and have them be aware of what you're dealing with, really, what group you're now dealing with, so that they come into that conversation fully educated. They don't have to share what they know, and they don't have to share that they've had these talks with you as a parent, for example, but just to remind the person in a cult that they have connections and they have a world that exists still outside the cult. Cults don't really want you to believe that. And they want to keep you sequestered, and they want you to doubt your connections to anyone else in the group. And when you get reminded that, in fact, you do have people who care about you, and you have people who are missing you, it's a very powerful message.
Very much so. I'm curious, out of all of the people you've helped and spoken with over the years, I think sometimes people get the idea that there's supposed to be it's all supposed to happen in one go. You sit them down and you're going to talk some sense into them or something, and they have this idea that this is going to be some quick thing.
Just one big intervention.
Yeah, and I think that's a very unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, it's an unrealistic expectation, and I think unless someone really is in danger, where you do need to help them get to safety right away.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, what you have is you want to have kind of a slow burn. You want to treat them respectfully, which is not how they're being treated in the group.
Right.
Um,
That's right.
and so you can say to them, listen, we're not trying to get you to leave anything. You can do what you want to do. We're just wanting to remind you, basically. You can say this with your words or with your actions, but the idea is we're trying to remind you we're here and we care and we love you and you have a place with us. And you don't have to worry that you've burned your bridges, even if you've disconnected from us or written us letters that were unkind or left messages that were mean, or you didn't come to so-and-so's funeral or so-and-so's wedding. We love you unconditionally.
Right.
And you can always come back.
That's right. Because they have to realize that the cult's love and care and compassion for them is always conditional.
Yep.
Upon their staying with the cult, agreeing with the cult leader, following the cult's rules. I've had to make it clear to people who can't understand how somebody could forsake family or friends, business associates, whatever, in that whole disconnection, shunning thing that Scientology does. How can somebody do that? And the way I've explained it is, well, they've sort of gotten it in their heads that a friend is a fellow cult member. And if you're not that, you're not really a friend. So
exactly right. And if they doubt you on that point, which they will, they'll say, no, these are my true friends and these are the ones who care about me more than anyone else. I think what you can say is, you know what? I hope that's true. I hope you're having the experience that you think you're having. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice to know that you got involved with a group of people who love you more than anyone else in this world and are going to love you no matter what? But let me ask you a question. Have you been in the group long enough to notice that somebody has left the group? Yeah, probably
right.
yes. And what happened after they left? Were you allowed to talk to them? Or how were they talked about in the group?
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to get that across real subtly sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And
you can't beat them over the head with it.
No, but that's also sometimes what keeps people in because they know they're going to be fodder for,
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh, very much so.
How could you have bought that?
Yeah. Oh no, that's for sure. I very much agreed with what Steve Hassan had said in his book on combating cult mind control, that it is love and compassion that's going to get somebody out of a situation like that. It's never anger and antagonism. You're never going to argue somebody out of a cult.
You're not going to argue someone out of a cult. It's very true. People dig their heels in. It's human nature.
That's right.
It's about doing the dance. And the dance, as I see it, is if you come too far forward into someone's face, they're going to back way up. But you don't want them to back up. The whole point is you want them to come forward. You want them to open up. You want them to feel like they can share things with you. And if you're, in their face, they're never going to do it, especially kids of any age. When they're dealing with parents, there's something that gets triggered. I hear friends of mine who are in their 40s and 50s, where they go home to visit their parents and they start behaving like 13-year-olds. Like,
right.
What just happened to me? And I'm annoyed and I slam my door and and right. I have 4 kids. Like, what? I'm acting like them. So something happens when you're with your parents where you feel like you have to save face and you want them to trust that you can make good decisions for yourself and you want to prove something about yourself. So yeah, if you come at them with any kind of criticism, they're going to dig their heels in because it's no longer safe to say, actually, I'm concerned myself. And I think, one of the things that keeps people in also, besides the fact that they know they're going to be skewered and they're going to be made to feel very scared, and especially in Scientology, they're going to be made to feel scared of pursuing any kind of counseling, which I get a lot. People ask me if I'm going to be putting electrodes on them, and
wow.
I mean, it's bizarre.
Well, the whole anti-psychiatry and psychology thing that Hubbard inculcated is powerful because they are very, very serious about that stuff.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. Or that something bad is going to happen to you if you
Hmm.
share the secrets. I think what I've noticed, it's happened actually many, many times within one-on-one cults and all other cults, that when people start noticing that they want to leave, they have reestablished a connection with either family or friends, so they know they're not going to be alone in the world, which really empowers people to feel like they can kind of get the nerve up to leave because they're not leaving everyone they know in the world. They have somewhere to go, and people who
Yes.
care. It makes a huge difference. But a lot of them feel like they have to somehow come up with a good enough reason to satisfy the people in the group, or in Scientology, their auditor, or someone else who is a good friend, they think, in the group. There was a woman I know who was working 2 years on a letter to give to her guru that was going to satisfy him, that was going to have a reason that was good enough for her to leave.
I I completely understand what you're talking about because you could just as easily be describing me
Okay.
and how
Two
I had to
years.
go about getting out of Scientology, and I had to do exactly what you're saying. I had to come
Interesting.
up with good enough reasons
Mm-hmm.
to convince them that it was okay for me to
Mm-hmm.
go,
Mm-hmm.
even though it wasn't really okay. Nobody was
Yeah.
happy with it, but it was still acceptable enough. And before any of that happened, I had reestablished communication with my parents, who I
Mm.
had been very out of touch with. Um, so I just sort of accidentally, naturally, luckily, whatever, went through these exact steps you're talking about
It's
in creating
fascinating.
that for myself.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know. That is fascinating. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Um,
it's fascinating listening to you talk about this because I'm like, because this was going to be the exact thing I was going to ask you about next is, what do you recommend for somebody who contacts you who is still in a cult
yeah.
and wants to get the hell out but doesn't know how? What do they do? So please carry on.
Okay. That reminds me of a conversation that I had with someone who was living in a house in upstate New York, and it was an Eastern meditative cultic group, and she had wanted to leave for a long time. It was about a year. She had said that she was going to leave around her birthday, and it was almost her next birthday, and she still hadn't left. And she called me and said, "What do I do? Every time I come to speak to the guru and I tell him that I'm unhappy, and I tell him that my life isn't going anywhere, and I tell him that the things that I've been promised have never come true, and I feel like if he is so compassionate and he's so kind, and I call him my father, that he should understand that and say, okay, go and be free. But instead, he gives me more to study, and he gives me more to memorize and more mantras to learn. He tells me to go out and recruit other people, keeping the well-oiled machine well-oiled.
Hmm.
Um, and I haven't been able to leave. And I keep trying to come up with other things. I haven't been to a doctor since I've been here. I haven't been to a dentist. I've had a toothache for months. I I
Wow.
haven't been able to do anything. I haven't been able to talk to my family. I have no money. My passport was taken from me. I don't have any ID. I keep asking for it back, and he says you're not ready. What do I do? And I said, I'm going to say something that might blow your mind, and you might think that that's never been an option, but it's always been an option. You just leave.
Hmm.
You just open the door and go, and don't go back. And she said, wait, what?
That's right.
But I understand. I mean, of course, you don't think that that's an option because you're
That's
part of
right.
a community and you're supposed to answer to the people there, and you're thinking that they really care. And it's so sad because she could have left all along, but was imprisoned in her mind.
Exactly. Exactly. That's so accurate. And one reason I absolutely loved Lawrence Wright's book on Scientology
Mm-hmm.
because he so cleverly called his book, Going Clear: Scientology and the Prison of Belief.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the bars are made of your own belief.
Yes,
You know?
exactly right. And I think also what really helps when I deal with people who are considering leaving is I say, you want to learn about cults. You want to learn about how they operate, why you were
Yes.
told what you were told,
Mm-hmm.
how that served the leader and not you, how being told that anyone in the group is of a higher status or higher caliber than everyone else in the world makes you feel like as soon as you leave it, you're going to be with the dregs of society, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't
Yep.
want to be there. And you're going to be abandoning your cause, and you're going to be abandoning these friends and family who really don't ultimately have the intention of staying in contact with you once you leave. And that I think you have to push against the fears. There's so much fear induction. But to learn why there is fear induction, that there really isn't so much to be afraid of, but when someone doesn't want you to leave, they'll make you scared of leaving. That's the thing that works the best.
Yep.
Um, and so it gets under your skin. And a lot of people, years later, after leaving a cultic group, will still have this sort of voice in their head where they say, but what if they were right? And if something bad happens, there's still this kind of emotional reaction, a knee jerk reaction, where they say very often, that happened to me because I left. And then they have to say, wait, no, 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 no. Okay, wait, no. I can't keep believing that. I can't keep believing that things are connected that are not truly connected. That things are not a sign that it was bad for me to leave or dangerous for me to leave. There's randomness in the universe. It's not because I left or because I'm in or because of anything. Things just happen. And it was still a better thing for me to leave. I mean, I think it's
Yep.
hard. It's hard for people to leave and it's hard for people to stay out. They have to really understand what motivates the leader. It's like someone leaving an abusive relationship. They need to understand that it wasn't their fault that they got hit. It wasn't because they didn't make dinner on time. It has nothing to do with them.
Exactly. And that education step is more important than I think a lot of people grant or understand until they've actually done it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge, huge thing for me to read, Steve Hassan's materials and find things on the internet and whatnot. I'm just relating this back to me because I think it's
Mm-hmm.
good advice. I think what you're saying is absolutely, absolutely correct. It's you almost learn when you learn about destructive cults, Yanya's paper and whatnot, and the books on this, and Lifton's work and Margaret Singer's work. You almost find out that there could be a cult leader playbook that's
Mm-hmm.
out there that these guys must read because they all do almost the exact same things.
Yes, it is unbelievable, actually.
It really is.
Yeah,
It's amazing
it is.
the control methods and the procedures that are followed and whatnot from cult to cult to cult that are same, same, same. And
Right.
it's very liberating as an ex-cult member to learn that you were not in a situation that was quite as unique as you thought it was.
Exactly right. When I do support groups for former cult members, oh, and I'm starting another one in January in my office here in LA. It is fascinating for the people from a variety of different groups to suddenly realize, oh my goodness, my group didn't invent that. They just called it something else,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And what's also, it's reminding me, years ago, I was speaking at a conference, actually at a Cult Awareness Network conference. And when Cult Awareness Network was okay,
Before they were owned by Scientology.
before they were owned by Scientology.
Yes.
It's really the fox watching the hen house. So what I remember was that there was a day where they had former members meeting to do some support groups, and so people from Bible-based groups could meet with each other, and people from, you know, the kind of therapy cults could meet with each other, et cetera, et cetera. And someone, I don't remember who it was, but I've remembered it ever since, made a button to give out to the people who were coming to the support group for Bible-based cults, and it said, "My God can beat up your God."
Right.
And it was fascinating, right? We have the right way. No, we have the true way. No, we are the ones who have God. No, we're the ones who have God. And it starts to feel kind of ridiculous when you see it at that, you know, when you're out of it and you see that a lot of this is, when you reduce it to that kind of level, that here you have these leaders who are behaving like they're above all others, but really are very juvenile. They've never quite grown up. They've never quite developed that kind of confidence, that quiet confidence, where they can be educators, or they can be pastors, or they can be all of these things, but still be okay if people don't want to follow them. That's fine. It doesn't bother them. But that's not who you're going to find, you know, leading a cult. What's been interesting in doing this work too is having met a couple of cult leaders, and seeing also that they sometimes do this for a variety of reasons. The ones that are the most insidious and destructive cult are the ones where the leader knows what he or she is up to. And they're doing this, they're running it like something that is beneficial to you, but really they're business people.
Yes. Yes.
And they're just using every influence technique that you'll see in a lot of different arenas, and you'll even see on the Home Shopping Network, you know, like there are only 12 left, and unless you order right away,
Right. The buy now.
buy now, and this will change your life, and it's your
Yep.
only chance, and then you'll look like this person who, you know, has had a lot of work done on her face, but well, we're not going to tell you that. We're just going to say it's because she's wearing this foundation. I think that then what you notice when a leader is really not psychologically well is then you have a group that's not psychologically healthy. So
Yes.
sort of the sicker the leader is, the sicker the group is. There are also some cult leaders who started out kind of okay, but over time developed this grandiosity so that they became more psychologically ill, and then the group really, you know, became more psychologically ill, like Jim Jones. And then there are others who are just, I mean, I know I'm a therapist and I probably shouldn't say it like this, but there are others who are just crazy. They're just crazy. They're not like, you know, the group Heaven's Gate in San Diego was run by a guy who really was crazy and was very believable in his psychosis, because the story about, you know, the mothership coming after the Hale-Bopp comet, you know, he said it like he really knew it to be true. His story never changed because he really
Right.
believed it. And it was dangerous because it turned out to be a suicide cult. But other than that,
Right. Yeah, it
it
was fine except for
Yeah,
except for the
that's great.
suicide
Yeah.
part.
was fine.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a fascinating story in connection with this group that reminds me of a quote by Margaret Singer, who, you know, was a visionary and a teacher in this area. Was a professor at UC Berkeley and was really heavily harassed by Scientology.
Yes.
She used to talk, when she was asked what made something a cult, she would say, within a cult, you learn to deny the evidence of your senses.
Yep. Yep. Good way of putting it.
And so there was a story connected with this group in San Diego where they bought a telescope. This was in the New Yorker, I remember. They bought a telescope and set it up so they could watch the Hale-Bopp comet and be able to find the mothership that was flying supposedly behind it. And they directed it at this comet, and they looked and they looked and they looked. And then they took the telescope back to the shop and said, it's not working.
Of course. Of
Right?
course. Of course they did.
You learn to deny the evidence of your senses.
All right. It must be the telescope.
It must be the
Yes.
telescope.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is really amazing, the phenomena, the mental, psychological gymnastics that people will engage in these activities. And which is why I also try to stress that it's not just, in religious circles that you'll run into this, because you certainly can find the same degree of behavior in sports, in politics, in social groups, and that really shouldn't be ignored either.
Are you
Exactly
saying
right.
love of the saints is wrong?
That's
And
exactly what
the
I'm saying.
saints?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's right.
Right.
You've not obviously heard of Brevis, as we so call him down there. Sorry, we got off on football, and that was wrong.
Well, I have a trained professional here who's doing, anyway. All right. Anyway, thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
I would very much like to make sure we also get in here your contact information. You are out in Los Angeles. How do people reach you?
Right. So I have a few ways to be reached. One is leaving a message on my office line. The number is 818-907-0036. You can also send me an email at RB for Rachel Bernstein, rbpsychology@gmail.com. I have a website, rachelbernsteintherapy.com. And I think also just to know that when I start up my support group again in January, I'll let you know so you can let your listeners know.
Absolutely. And we'll have all of this in our show notes so people can find it there as well, your website link and contact number and email address. And I just want to say thank you very much for coming on our show here. I think this has been extremely enlightening. We're definitely running way over our usual hour, and I don't care at all.
Nope.
This will be great for that. And
I'm positive our listeners won't care.
Nope,
either.
not a little bit, not even a little bit. And your information has been absolutely fascinating and very, very important for anybody who is interested in or has family or friends in a cult situation.
Even
right?
on a personal level, for myself, I felt that a lot of the information that you were able to provide helped me just in this last hour and a half of going, oh, okay, so other people, whether they're in a cult situation or coming from a quote unquote traditional religion like mine, other people are feeling the same way I'm feeling. Because I definitely had those moments of, is this happening because I have turned away from God? Or is this happening because my mother is praying for me? Who knows? But I do have to have those situations where I need to remind myself that I'm better. And I haven't had to cut off ties with my religious family, which is fantastic. But, it's good to hear that that's normal.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's very normal. And it's part of our culture and many people's cultures to use that kind of magical thinking, to see things as signs. And for some people, that really works for them. The only problem is that then you are making connections between things that aren't connected. And you can do it in a positive way, and you can just as easily do it in a negative way. And that's where you run into trouble. Because if you think that God is going to reward you for doing something good, and then something suddenly bad happens, you think, that must be a punishment for something that I did. And that can send you reeling. And so it is, but it is a very common thing to get into that kind of magical thinking. We're a lot of us raised in different religious communities are sort of trained that way. And then we have to think after a while if this is helping us or hurting us, and realize that it's actually an optional activity.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, but thank you also, to both of you and for all that you're doing to get the word out there about this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so important.
Very
And I
much.
know, there's a lot to talk about too with, political cults and ISIS and all of that, and, maybe for another time. But
Hmm.
it's really, it's all something that we're noticing around us. We just might not have the language to know what to call it, but it's all different methods of control, and that sometimes it's used for good and sometimes it's really used for destruction. And that's why you just want to be on top of it and know what it is.
Precisely. All right, Rachel, thank you very much, and I'm sure we will talk again soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we are at the end of our show, so we're going to be signing off here. I want to thank you guys very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, as usual, you can write to us at chris@sensiblyspeaking.com.
Or ruth@sensiblyspeaking.com.
Or just leave comments, as usual, on the YouTube videos or on the website at sensiblyspeaking.com.
And I'm sorry if my stuffy self sounded weird or if anybody heard me sniffling. I am very sick this week.
Yes, but she is a brave soul who persevered for the cause, and I hope you all appreciate that.
Oh, I just like being here breathing all over everything. I hope everything gets infected and you get sick, darn it.
Wow. Wow. Feel the love, folks. All right, we'll be talking to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.